All right,
Did that
Maria,
work?
we're rocking. We're rocking and rolling. I love it.
Me too. So welcome to our new platform live, you
On
know,
Facebook.
on Facebook. Well, everybody,
Yes.
hello. Maria
Hello,
Horseman from
everyone.
You.
Yes, first time I'm bringing Maria Horseman onto my personal Facebook page. I'm super excited. She's a fellow FDN practitioner, just like me. Why don't you just give your little spiel real quick, Maria, so people know who you are?
Oh, this spiel as a functional diagnostic practitioner is here. We are here to empower people to live their best life, to feel with their peak energy and all that by getting data as the foundation.
Yes.
So we kind of eliminate the guessing out of this as much as possible, making this very individualized and using functional lab testing and doing our amazing coaching and putting personalized, strategies to help you feel your best. That's what I do.
That's it. You got it. And it kind of the differentiator, really. I mean, I wouldn't even say that, but like where you love to focus is the whole like metabolic health, hormone health, that type of thing, Maria, right?
Yes, love
And
it.
I'm more like
Love it.
the gut people, right? So it's fun because we bring our different expertise to the table, and obviously there's a lot of overlap, which is why these conversations I think have been really valuable, just to bring different insights to the table, right?
Agree 100%. Yes. I guess you and I will work with the same people, but some people are going to be attracted more depending on their goals, right? If somebody's
Exactly.
screaming with gut health, IBS, IBD, and several other imbalances, they might be more inclined to go with you because that's more of your expertise. You spend more of your time on that. And me, I still work with the gut folks, but you also will work with metabolic folks, but there is
Totally.
something that is more a driven, more passion behind it, which both of those things that we both work are foundational for health. I don't care what it is, it's gut health, metabolic health, they're
Yeah,
foundation. And actually, when we look into a pyramid of health, you know, gut and glucose management are actually hand in hand because one
totally.
is going to impact the other. So, yes, we have our little passions behind of what we do, but in reality is we are helping individuals in all facets of their health and wellness, I guess, imbalances or areas that they want to get better at.
Yeah, well said, Maria. All right, well, let's dive into our topic today. So, for those of you
Yes.
joining us, first and foremost, I will see if I can repost in some way, shape, or form our original Instagram couple of like meetings that we've done. This we're kind of technically on like number three in our current cycle, I would say, but
Yeah.
we've been covering some topics every month, and it's been a nice little like compendium we're building here. But this month's topic is all on cravings, cortisol, and the cycle of burnout. So. Let's just dive right in there, Maria. I want you to kind of speak to blood sugar imbalances and the cravings piece from that metabolic health standpoint, and then I can kind of bring the gut perspective in. Does that sound good?
Yeah, that sounds great. So, we know a lot of individuals are thinking, what does it mean metabolic health? What does it mean? What does it relate to when I talk to a 5-year-old? Metabolic health is really your body's energy, if you think about it, it's how metabolizing, your foods, how creating energy. So there's multiple things that are going to impact that energy creation, right? From everything that we decide to ingest, to from foods to beverages, but also to stress that is perceived or actually added to our lives, stress and burnouts in the body, which actually a lot of gut issues are different stressors. Then we think
Mhm.
about, metabolic health from a perspective of blood sugar imbalances, and that will often comes from what the main culprit here is foods. Then there is beverages, there is a stress level, there is sleep patterns, there is meditation. Our blood sugar is impacted by about everything that we do. And oftentimes we just think about food, but it's way more than that. So when we think about how do we know if we have any metabolic, what kind of symptoms people uh, witness, or feel? Well, the most critical ones is like fatigue,
Mm.
tiredness, and weight gain or stubborn weight that you cannot get rid of it. Those are the most important ones that, or the most ones that people complain about. But as you dive into it, there is going to be several others that we oftentimes are not correlating to blood sugar imbalances and metabolic health, right? Because when
Yeah.
we think about, you know, from a perspective of metabolic health, we think about the cells, and imagine that the cells, the cell membranes are kind of little houses in your body. And
Mhm.
the health of the cell's membranes are very important, goes to the foods that we eat. And then there is insulin receptors and things like that. And then in the foods that we eat is like, okay, is our house allowing that glucose, which gets inside the cell to create energy? Is that getting inside? Well, that is a key question. If you think about it, when you hear the term insulin resistance,
Yeah.
well, that's not working very well. So
Right.
the glucose that comes from the foods that we consume are there circulating, but it's like that door, of the cell membrane of these houses are kind of rusty, and then the glucose and energy cannot get inside for creation of ATP, right? That we all know about it. So there is several mechanisms in there that, hopefully that kind of makes sense as a little introduction. So when we hear about cravings and we hear about blood sugar dysregulation and fatigue, and if you have those symptoms, I'm like, okay, well, is there something that I have to look into my, start with food habits, but then there is several other things, like I mentioned earlier, that are going to impact the health, this glucose spikes and dips and all that kind of stuff. So hopefully that gives a little introduction, because when we think about, you know from that perspective of the cells are little doors, and is the doors rusty to get this glucose from the foods that we consume inside to generate energy, it's fatigue everywhere, because every
Mhm.
cell has insulin receptors in the cell membranes. So now, okay, is that a brain fog? Is that you're not as sharp? Is that your muscles are not strong enough, or you cannot get them stronger? You feel weaker. All of a sudden, you're like constipation. So we're talking about the energy of every single cell, energy of our organs, and that's it. So then goes back to gut health, right? How can that impact gut health in the energy of our microbiome, and how even imbalances in glucose can create imbalances in the microbiome.
Yeah, no, that's beautifully said, Maria. And I think what people sometimes don't realize when it comes to that free floating glucose is it's not a problem of not eating enough and or not having enough like literal sugar available to the cells. It's like you said, it can't get in. And so that's where we can start to think about different blocks that are in
Right.
place that are not allowing that sugar to literally enter the cell. And so that can sometimes be a more complex problem than what meets the eye. And that's where I think you and I both see this from different places. Like with gut health, there's always this component, but with metabolic health, there often is too, where it can often get back to the gut because we really have to think about we need specific vitamin cofactors, for example, to adequately get that glucose into the cell. And
Mm-hmm.
yes, diet is important, right? And having a nutrient dense diet is important. The more whole foods in their, real form state you can eat, and as diverse a diet as possible, right? Without obviously within reason triggering maybe symptoms for foods you're sensitive to. That all sets the stage, but then there's these other components like how well are you digesting those foods, right? You could be
Mm-hmm.
putting, to use a
Yes.
car analogy, you could be putting really high grade octane into the tank, but if there's a problem with the engine that it can't burn that gas, you could do that all day long. You're wasting your money, right? Like you're not actually able to utilize that fuel. So,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah, you want to say something on that, Maria?
Now I was gonna say, I would love for you to kind of talk a little bit more about, you know, what do you see that on the stool test? I know we both use the stool test for about every client, right? Because it's so
Yeah.
critical. But how do you see that? Because this is key. Oftentimes people are eating the healthy foods, but it's almost like this, folks. Sometimes, my car, for example, is an older car, right?
Yeah.
And okay, the color of this black car is getting kind of beat up. Well, okay, I can go in paint, but well, it's still rusty and it's gonna
Yeah.
go away anyway. Okay, so the outside I can make it pretty, but okay, how is the car, the transmission? How is the power? Because if it is an older car, I can make it look pretty. And that sometimes we can think about, when we transition, if somebody, and you can speak a lot about that too, right? When we think about the gut health, I see a lot of individuals that have significant problems with gut and metabolic health, that they just
Hmm.
say, you know what, i'm just gonna I'm just gonna start eating healthy now, and that's great, that is fantastic.
Hmm.
But it's almost like putting the paint on the top of the car. Are we really healing,
Yeah.
what is going on?
Yeah.
Because then can get people very frustrated. You know what? I start eating better, I start doing
Mhm.
this, and I'm still not don't have the energy. I cannot lose the weight, or got stuck on the weight loss because we're
Mhm.
what doing what we're not kind of working on inside the car, right? So I would
I
love for you to
agree.
talk a little bit more about using, for example, the stool test and some of the markers that we see there.
Yeah, absolutely. And this also, by the way, explains why you have these really mystery weight loss cases where people are eating pretty darn well and they're still not losing weight, which I'm sure you see quite often, Maria. So, folks, this
Yeah.
can be complicated. It's not all in your head. Like, yes. Back to the stool test, back to the GI map, which is our preferred test. This is the one that we're like deeply trained in as FDN practitioners. So, this is a test that's amazing for a lot of different reasons, but one of the things the test looks at is digestive function. And there's direct markers of digestive function on the test that will give us specific clues about, for example, how much enzymes the pancreas is producing, which is one of the upper GI organs that has to work on breaking down your food appropriately. We'll get clues on bile quality, which is another digestive fluid produced in the liver that is needed to actually break your fat down, which, by the way, fat builds hormone. So, right here, we have a gut hormone connection, meaning that hormones and metabolic health, all of this is also into very closely connected. That's what I'm trying to say. Talking too fast, Courtney, getting all tripped up here. But anyhow, point is, there's some great markers on this test. Now, we can actually get clues on digestive function around stomach acid production too. There isn't really on any stool test a specific direct marker of that, but there are definitely a number of different things indirectly that can tell us a lot about how well the stomach is working. And so, to that end, being trained to read a test like that, we can really look at all of that and get a pretty good sense of, is this person actually breaking their food down appropriately? Or do we see some major weaknesses here that we might need to actually support? And this can be a chicken and egg thing where sometimes, if they've been on a really nutrient poor inflammatory diet for a long time, they don't have the cofactors and the nutrients needed to build specific digestive fluids. Like, for example, stomach acid needs appropriate zinc as a cofactor to have a good amount of it, right? So
Mhm.
sometimes it's actually bringing in those digestive supports overtly to kickstart that digestive process. But
Mhm.
also, sometimes it's working with diet and specific vitamin nutrient supports as well to kind of get the whole thing moving again. And so, when it comes to just this like glucose uptake, it's really common actually that people are severely deficient in certain B vitamins, especially,
Mhm.
that make it harder then to get those nutrient or that sugar into the cells. And where does that problem originate? It originates back at the level of digestion.
Yeah.
Particularly, it could be even the small intestine in this case, right? Because this is the
Mhm.
part of the digestive tract that's responsible for absorbing our vitamins specifically and bringing those into the bloodstream to deliver them to the cells of the body. So that's kind of my spiel on that piece.
No, and I think it's great. And then we think of like, well, from a metabolic health, you're talking about the gut. We're talking about testing on the gut, right? And it
Yep.
says, well, what do we do on a metabolic health perspective?
Yes.
Because let me tell you, the number of people that I meet that they believe that blood sugar imbalances are only correlated with diabetes, you know,
Hmm.
and they don't see that maybe a weight stubbornness or fatigue and things like that are related to blood sugar imbalances. They think that, okay, I don't have diabetes, so that is not a problem. Well, the problem with those kind of things, these doors and rusty doors and allowing the nutrients in and all that, it starts way before. But that is not the language. The language is weight and fatigue and inability to build muscle and feeling literally lethargic, knock yourself again. So it becomes a
Right.
complex kind of situation. But yes, we can do a lot of testing. And in my case over here, yes, hormone testing, a good panel of thyroid, because blood sugar imbalances are going to impact also the thyroid, which is going to impact also estrogen, testosterone, the DHEA, and is going to impact the gut. So this is why we kind of like to look into a holistic way that is not maybe one test only, but we also look into blood markers, and that is phenomenal for metabolic health. So there's some key markers that I'm always looking into the blood. And folks, even if you don't have insurance, you don't have a doctor, you don't need that, okay,
Yeah.
to
Right.
get blood work done. You just
Yeah.
need somebody capable and trained to at least order for you and help you with that. But in these days, you don't even need that, but you also want to have somebody educated to understand or say, well, let's look into these numbers, and
Yeah.
also let's correlate to your symptoms,
Yeah.
because there is many areas that this GI map in digestive health is not gonna be looking pretty good. But if a person is vegan, for example, well, maybe
Mhm.
these numbers are going to be skewed. So there is a history that we got to take, right, to
Yeah.
really associate, well, the person has beautiful numbers, you shouldn't have any problems with digestion and markers that you are taking down those foods. But then it's like, every time I eat this, I have a problem. I cannot eat it. Okay, okay. Because the body needs to be challenged in a way, right? To
For
see
sure.
those things.
For sure.
And sometimes the diet that the person has might not be challenging enough for even to mark for a GI map to pick it up. But from a blood work, then we see some markers that are, most people understand the fasting glucose. Okay, that is a point in time. That is interesting. There is data that associated after 84, 85, there is a higher risk for diseases. Okay, fine. But if you're all stressed out, that number is going to be impacted. It's going to be very volatile, right?
Totally.
Then you have your A1C, hemoglobin A1C, which is basically, you know, how many, how much sugar you have basically for 3 months in your body. So imagine like your red blood cells are cookies, and when you eat those cookies, there is sprinkles that we stick in that cookie. So how many sprinkles are into that cookie that are glued to that cookie? That is
Yeah.
basically 3 months of those sprinkles that we see. So when we have a lot of that means that there's a lot of things glued to that cookie, right?
Exactly.
So those numbers are also going to be associated then. Okay, is this door getting the glucose in, if the glucose into the cell or not? So the person can have higher levels. It's going to mean that the body might starting to starve, like, okay, I don't understand that there is glucose inside the cell. So there's things like that.
Yeah.
And then there is insulin levels, which is a fat storage hormone, very critical. Again, higher glucose levels, more of this insulin. And then here comes people who cannot lose weight or fat,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Because they're producing too much insulin. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, the number of blood work that I see from my clients that come with blood work from their physicians that don't measure A1C, don't measure insulin, you know they're not
Yeah.
measuring c-peptide, which is another great marker that I like to look into it. And then they're not looking into maybe ratios of triglycerides to HDL. Those things are kind of basic
Yeah.
that can give all kinds of signs, to metabolic dysfunction. And there is a lot more, right? But
Yeah.
basic stuff, basic, and everybody has access to this, with or
Yeah.
without insurance. We just need to be educated on it, and then put strategies in, when possible, do a more holistic approach with a gut health, with a gut panel, with hormone panels, with several other, blood marker or blood tests that we can actually dive into it.
Yeah, no, that's such a great point. I'm actually glad you brought up the blood work, Maria, because this is making me think of just like a quick story to kind of show just how well these things can work together.
Yeah.
So, and you're right. By the way, before I tell this story, I just want to say that people would be shocked at how cost effective it is to run blood work out of pocket. It's actually, and you will agree with me here, one of the cheaper tests that even we can run as functional practitioners. So
Yeah.
don't necessarily dismiss that if your insurance doesn't cover it,
Yeah.
it won't be. And I've actually had cases where when clients have compared to what their insurance would cover for specific panels versus what I would have to charge them out of pocket for specific panels, the out of pocket cost was cheaper too. So it's not necessarily as inaccessible as you might think. And so
Yes.
that being said, Maria, so quick story on this. So I took my almost 14-year-old, my firstborn, to the doctor because he needs a physical for football, right? And he's at that age, I guess, now where they offer blood work, and he's really never had a blood draw before. Like typically they won't do it on kids unless they have
Yeah.
a major reason. So I was like thinking to myself, well, yeah, I would actually like to look at his blood work because of course we can, right? As an FDN practitioner. So I said, sure, go ahead, do the blood draw. But this is the thing, you're limited to what the insurance will pay for, which is something, but it's not maybe as complete as what we need, which is what you were just
Yes.
speaking to. So interestingly, the panel comes back and he was actually fasting that day, so that helped with getting a more accurate glucose marker and that type of thing. So I looked at it and it was like fasting glucose was like 97. I'm like, wow, that is kind of
Mm,
high for like a 13-year-old boy.
yeah.
And there were some other things that were way off. And then the weirdest thing though was like his liver enzymes were elevated. And of course the doctor called later and was like, well, that could just be a fluke. Let's just rerun that again in a month. And I was like,
Mm,
no, I
mm,
think,
mm.
well, I didn't tell her this, but I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, I'm going to run a GI map. There's definitely something going on with the gut that's leading to this, right? So, sure enough, I ordered the GI map, ran it on him. Now, keep in mind, I think half of the problem is diet, right? Which just gets back to the foundations of health and why they're so important. Because although he lives in a household where we work, work really hard on diet, there's no wheat allowed, very limited dairy. We're definitely not the typical American household, and it's pretty nutrient dense food. He's still going to choose the foods that are more carby, sugary. We could argue processed because we have some of that still available, right?
Mhm, mhm,
And
mhm.
so, like, not only did we see major microbiome imbalances where specifically, like, I think it's Firmicutes were like way high and his like Bacteroidetes
Wow.
were way low. He looked like a kid with metabolic health issues. Like the FDP ratio was way high on this kid. And I'm like, part of this is all those carbs you're eating. You have to have more
Wow.
protein fat. But here's the
Yes.
kicker, like what I didn't realize, and I'm so glad I caught this doing the GI map, was his beta glucuronidase was elevated. So there you
Wow, at
go.
13?
At 13, not severely, but moderately,
Right.
right? And now think about it, Maria. You get this because he's at that age. He's starting to hit his growth spurt. Testosterone's
Yeah.
starting to go up. What do you think is going to happen between testosterone
Oh,
and
yeah.
estrogen to a boy with elevated beta glucuronidase, right? And some insulin resistance going
Right.
on? Guess it.
Yes.
Estrogen
Yes.
dominance, right?
Actually, yes, especially if he
Yes.
continues on a low, high carb diet, which, you
Yes.
know,
Yeah.
it's obviously his exercise is going to be key over here going to football, but a lot of times, they overdo on the carbs,
Yeah.
pre, post, and keep going. And
Yeah. All right, Maria, we're back. We're live. All right, we had a little freeze up here. Sorry, folks. It was a technical snafu, which can happen when you're using things like Zoom. So, Maria,
more
where were
life.
we? We were talking about GI map
Yes.
testing and blood work, right? And the connections we
Yes.
find in those. Yeah.
Yeah. And the part that we're talking about that I recall is you're mentioning about your son, right? And
Yes.
then you're talking
Yes.
about his glucose being elevated and also beta glucarase, which we see on the GI map,
Yes.
and things like that. And then I was kind of and you're talking about the carbs being around the house, although you are a healthy household compared to the average, most people likely, obviously, we don't know.
Right, right,
And you're
right.
like, okay, he's just 13. And I think got interrupted when I was kind of mentioning, about, okay, he's just 13 and he's in sports and he obviously can afford, that's what the
Mhm.
best time to put carbs is around exercise. That's what I tell my clients, especially women who are really anti-carbs. Oh my God, so many women, their 40s and 50s, thinks that they cannot have carbs. And I said, folks, ladies, that's why you lift heavy shit, literally,
Yeah.
right?
Right,
That's why
right,
you
right, right.
exercise and you lift and you not only get stronger, your muscles are going to be very hungry to grow and they're going to bypass that insulin, is going to go and grab that glucose. So a young man like your son exercising,
Hmm.
so then yes, that eating those carbs going to help him. Now if he's eating too far off the exercise stuff late at night,
Yeah, that's
and
the other thing.
whatever,
Yeah,
that is going to be
that's the
impact. There's going to be an impact for a teenager, is going to be impact especially for a man and a woman later in their lives as well.
yeah.
Now, I mean, we know the epidemic of obesity and diabetes in the young folks. Now, your son in a few years is going to go to college.
Hmm.
Now he's going to be influenced by many things. Despite maybe all the amazing things you're teaching him, there is a chance that he's going to choose differently because the environment.
Oh, for sure, Maria. Yeah.
So, what are you doing for him and doing this test and educating him and kind of guiding him based on data? I think is amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing opportunity for him to say, okay, well, maybe I gotta look into this, because then you can do the same thing that for your son can do for our what we do for our clients, is what is truly important for that person.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. And I think kind of like something you just made me think of right now, and I'm putting this out there for adults listening that have kids that have maybe these weird imbalances, or maybe they actually have some chronic health issues, is that first of all, kids actually are much more responsive or tend to be to protocols that we would run, holistic protocols compared to adults. Now, yes, diet is a big piece of that, and that can be sometimes the challenging aspect whether they're little or teenagers, because if they already have some pretty stubborn food habits, changing it can be a bit of a battle with children. But let's just assume that that's not as big a deal in terms of just their body's ability to respond to the protocols and the products we would use. I would say arguably they're a lot faster and a lot more responsive. So catching these things earlier in life is actually, in my opinion, going to get you further ahead and be an easier problem to solve than, say, waiting until your 30s, 40s, 50s, or 60s. And then, the other thought I had too, Maria, which is I think these critical milestones, like for both boys and girls, like as they're hitting those puberty, teenage years, it isn't the worst idea to check things on kids at that time because their hormone levels are changing, microbiome is probably changing. There's a lot of just metabolic upregulation happening in those
Mhm,
years,
mhm, mhm.
similar to women who might be hitting perimenopause and then eventually menopause, right? Like you think about just the life cycles of both men and women from young to old, and just putting this
Mhm.
out there as we're having this conversation, like you can very much think about just your life cycle as these opportune windows to actually do a nice check in on your body and see how things are
Yes.
doing to try to get out ahead of problems that might be coming down the road, right?
Yes. I think being proactive is key,
Yeah.
especially if you notice that the teenager or the child have
Hmm.
already an inclination to eating more carbs. And again,
Yeah.
we're not anti-carbs here,
Right.
but that is also the age, that the protein is important.
Totally.
So those carbs, and then start thinking about, okay, is my child, active? Is my child sitting a lot? Is my child on the phone a lot? Is computers now at school and the phones and all that kind of stuff, and
Hmm.
not getting the activity level that are kind of a necessity for all of us in all ages. But then we think about bone growth in those kids, and
Yeah.
the diet, how is going to be impactful for that.
Yep.
This is the key time, to
Totally.
look into this. So the imbalance potential and the macronutrients for those kids are going to be key, going to be playing like when they are, you know, later in life. It's going to show. It's going to show on bone health. It's going to show on hormone dysregulation. It's going to show on chronic diseases early in life. So yes,
Hmm.
why not do a blood work?
Yeah.
As basic as it can be. There is like basic and there is more complex, like we can do it all, right?
Right.
And
Right.
if you have insurance, get the basic in. If
Yeah.
pediatrician says, well, why? And it says, you know what, I want to have a baseline for my child. Just
Exactly.
you have to be assertive.
Yeah.
Have to be assertive, like for your own health as an adult and also for the child.
Totally.
And then, yes, in that picture from blood work alone can see some problems, but then there is the gut health, which, yes, I work with, 17, 18 years old, that's 15, but not running labs. It was insane what I saw, because that child, actually, that boy, you know, couldn't gain weight. Well, we saw uh, a risk for celiac, which then at the time didn't listen to me, kind of was averse to it, in the in emergency room a year and a half later, and yes, was celiac. and several other things the kid was going through. And it says, okay, and teenagers are going to do what? They want to be in a comfort zone.
Yeah,
Oh,
totally.
well, this is not 100% sure. Says that's why you want to test. But then
Yeah,
certain physicians and even gastroenterologists are going to say, well, I don't know if that's, if we need that. There you go. End up in an emergency room. And then the ER doctor says, let's do this. And bingo, could have avoided a year and a half of problems, you
exactly,
know?
Maria.
So can we be more assertive in certain ways with, about the health of our kids? And then we have to be with ourselves, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, just on those same lines, just one other thing to put out there, and you're probably aware of this too, from a parent's perspective, is a lot of times pediatricians or family providers want to run blood work even on like 10, 11, 12 year olds because I've just seen more and more evidence that there's a push to push statins on kids now, right? Like they're
Mhm.
running actual cholesterol and lipid panels on these kids. And
Yeah.
again, that's a whole other wormhole we can go down at some point in the future because we have definitely some very different training and just how would you say frameworks from which we approach like high cholesterol and lipid imbalances that are
Mhm,
totally
mhm.
different than the way conventional practitioners would look at these things. But if imagine if you took your child in, they ran a lipids panel, okay, it's high cholesterol, and now you're getting this phone call. It's like, we want to put your child on a statin. There's a lot of really bad side effects and just issues that come with that. And now you're starting this child at the young age of 10, 11, 12. This is one of the reasons why having labs and then being able to do additional functional testing, particularly looking at the gut. In this case, I would
Yeah.
run a full thyroid panel, check that too, right? Like
Mhm.
this is not something most people understand to do, but this is where getting that full picture can really change the options on the table from only this one drug to, oh, we see other imbalances and now, okay, here's some evidence that could explain why the cholesterol's high. Why don't we go fix these other problems and then see if the cholesterol normalizes, right?
Yes, and, yeah, it's a great point, and, and I kind of observe, obviously, I don't have a child, right? And, I observe a lot the relationships and the communications and the concerns that the parents have with their children, especially when it comes to food.
Yeah.
Um, and there's some children that for whatever reason are not eating very healthy, and they are doing that for 10 years maybe now. And some parents might be listening to us and saying, well, there's no way in hell that my child is going to change the diet at this point.
Yeah.
It's going to be very difficult, because they become very picky. I think that the way that we present this information to a child, and again going back to why they want to succeed, because these kids have dreams, most of them. And if they, if we're not sure about it, there is always different ways that we can really ask questions to bring this up. And then we
Mm-hmm.
can associate their dreams with their health. We do this
Mm-hmm.
for adults, right?
Right.
We do this for adults. We have to have a bigger reason to change. You
Yeah.
have yours and I have mine, and we can share this another time again, but we are very passionate because it comes from our own health.
Exactly.
So when we kind of link those two things together and we come back, then the kids kind of start to understand and says, you know what? And because they're children, oh, it's fascinating the speed that the body can heal, right?
Mhm. Yeah,
A
exactly.
beautiful thing. So,
Yeah,
hey, maybe we don't need to change 10 things over here. Hey, let's add one this thing. Let's swap. I like the swapping,
yeah.
kind of idea, especially for children and adults too. Like take
Yeah,
this stuff where it's like, well, we're not taking any stuff. We're gonna add stuff and we're gonna decrease this until your
yeah.
body starts craving for this amazing food. Because when we see, like you mentioned about your child, you start seeing some bacteria overgrowth or lack
Mhm.
of in the gut, we know that the body's favoring something. And we're
Totally.
going to crave, going back to the topic here, craving things
Yeah,
is what we start putting over and over in our mouth. We change the microbiome and the behavior of the bacteria.
exactly. Yeah. The food
Can
you
we
eat
change it
changes.
back?
Yeah,
We can.
yeah, yeah.
Can we maybe, if the kid is maybe hesitant to change in the speed that we want, because the kid in a few years is going to go to college. Well, maybe supplementation from kind of food-based supplementation, herbs,
Yeah.
very powerful stuff,
Yeah.
that can really help to speed up the process a little bit. So let's address a few things that we can grasp that kid to say, this is why you want to do this, because this is important, and this is why better nutrition is going to help you.
Hmm.
And let's just speed it up with a few things here to heal, to strengthen the gut, whatever the heck is it, right? Or even, using technology. Like I love to use CGMs, continuous glucose monitor. You know, in a kid that you need definitely a lot of understanding on that from the parents. So work with a coach,
Yeah.
that understands that, so can guide you. You understand for yourself, and then maybe a child. But the behaviors of yours as a parent can be a signal for the child just to educate and inspire, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say, Maria. I think whether your child's young or old, you adopting the health behaviors and the eating behaviors you would like to see your children adopt is going to be key. I'd almost say it's necessary because very few children are going to do something they don't see their parents aren't willing to do, right? So that's a big piece of it. But one thing I did want to ask you real quick, just with the little bit of time we
Yeah.
have, is like with insulin resistance, because we kind of like talked about carbs, do you find, and based on kind of the experience you have around metabolic health and just being in the fitness world and stuff, that it matters whether kids or adults do cardio exercise versus strength training, Maria? Because like in my son's situation, he hates cardio, but he
Yeah.
likes to do weightlifting. So he does this little like strength training routine 5, 6 days a week. Now, granted, I think it's a little excessive sometimes, to be honest with you. So that could be playing a role in some of the like
Mm,
insulin resistance. But I just
yeah.
love to hear you speak to that because even despite doing that and being relatively young, I was still seeing signs in his blood work that it was happening, right?
Yeah, so strength training is going to be the most impactful when it comes to insulin resistance,
It will
right?
be.
Because
Yeah.
the muscle is going to be active. The muscle is going to continue to burn fat. The
Yeah.
muscle is going to, bypass the needs for insulin, is going to grab that glucose. So, for example, I did a month of eating quite poorly, to be honest, and testing, a month on a CGM. I do these tests here and there, right? But this time I went all out. And boy, I mean, I ate foods that I haven't eaten for a long time, but really eating more like the average population does. But certain things I says, no, there's no way I'm gonna eat a pasta bowl. That there's certain things I put some restrictions because there's no way. But other things I went to test. And let me tell you, I was back to irritable, craving foods all the time, thinking about food all the time, exactly how I was when I was pre-diabetic and had insulin resistance. And it says, oh my God, I forgot about this.
Yeah.
Going back to the example that I'm saying is because I even tested foods,
Yeah.
without having workout, unhealthy, somewhat carb-oriented foods,
Yeah.
without having a workout for a day and a half, 2 days,
Yeah.
and how the body responded. And I ate the same food, later in the day after I had worked in the morning. Very different impact. Very different. The muscle continues to work anything from 24 to 48 hours. So, is there a benefit of strength training? Yes. However, the body needs to also recover.
Yeah.
The cardiovascular is going to be on the carbs kind of thing, right? Is going to use more of that. And it's important for metabolic health in a way too. There's not
Hmm.
one form of exercise or modality, I want to say, that is going to be the most important. No, we need to stretch, we need flexibility. Okay, we need the cardiovascular for VO2 max for longevity, plenty of data that. We need strength training for even regulation of hormones, adaptations, muscle growth, which is going to help with, decreasing insulin resistance or preventing that or minimizing the risk, and fat loss. So some people can maintain the same weight, on a regimen of strength training, but they're going to see what? They start shrinking,
Yeah.
right? They start shrinking. That's not going to be the same with carbs, which with aerobic exercise. You might
Hmm.
lose weight because you're burning, burning, burning. But then we kind of come to the question says, is that burn just happens just after and then I'm done? Or do I want to actually build muscle to keep working in my favor? Does that make sense what I'm saying?
It definitely does. Yeah. So basically, like people should be exercising in all types and forms, but to
Yes.
get your biggest bang for your buck in terms of lowering potential for insulin resistance and being able to tolerate more carbs, strength training in particular is key for that. Like you should have a strength training regimen if you want to protect your metabolic health.
Yes, and I will say one more thing about that. It is not stagnant. How many, just today on a call with a lady in her 50s,
Mhm.
turning 60 very soon. You know, she goes to a hot yoga class and use weights. And it says, how long? She does 3 times a week. You know, and it says, what is the weight that you're using there? Well, about 10 or 15. And I'm actually the one who uses the most amount of weight in those classes. And I
Okay.
said, that is, you're very adept to that. And it says, yes, I am. And it says, that's no growth. We
Yeah.
need to continue to challenge the muscle. So I had clients a while back, that I was seeing for fitness that came from other trainers. They're doing the same stuff over and over and over. And here I am challenging. You need to challenge the body with different movements, not doing the same stuff, and also progressively they start increasing the weight and doing complex movements. That's how we find growth. But we also
Yeah.
need to, like I was telling this lady today, she does 3 days of cardiovascular, running, stop and go, stop and go. So it's nothing challenging. 3 days of this yoga and 10, 15 pounds. So she's doing a lot. She's moving. It's great. It's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
And I said, she's like, well, but I want to increase my muscle mass. I says, then you need to change,
Yeah.
right?
Totally.
And then, Miss, let's look into your recovery. That's where I also like the technology here, right?
Hmm.
So whether it's or a ring, what is it,
Love
some
that.
watch talking about your HRV, which is basically recover, autonomic nervous system. So there is a lot of technology today that can help us gauge our recovery, our readiness for the day, because then we can adjust. If you
Hmm.
got a shitty night of sleep, if you're exhausted, you're not going to go and lift 200 pounds on a deadlift. That's not the way to
Definitely.
do it, because then you can become more catabolic.
Hmm.
We need to rest. And the age here that we are, yes, that rest is going to be more. So
Yeah.
we can be with a good training, I guess, program, right? You can get a lot done in 30 minutes. But
Hmm.
it's not the one that you put the weight down and then you're watching the clock and you're watching the phone. It's none of that. Right. I walk through a gym, it's like most of the time the people are on the damn phone sitting in the machines. And I says, what the hell are you doing?
Isn't
I'm
that
like,
so true?
and they're like, oh, I'm at the gym every day for 2 hours. I said, what? Well, how much of work are you getting? This question about that. People go to the gym and half of the time they're looking at their phones, not being intentional,
Right.
and the time passes. Well, there is something about the timing that you do and the exercises, and the frequency, that intensity, you can get a lot done in 30 minutes. You can
Totally.
fatigue muscles, but you got to keep going.
Totally, totally, Marie. Like they need the busy mom's 30-minute workout. Like, I will say my personal person I love right now, and she's a YouTuber, is Carolyn Gervin.
Yeah.
Her workouts are freaking hard. But like
Really?
maybe you get too used to that stuff too. I don't know, but like it's you're right. Yes, that's so it. And we're gonna have to talk more about that topic because I think it's so fascinating, the whole exercise, like variability and all the components that can go
Yes.
into it. So
Yes.
well, let's like wrap it up with a quick action tip. I feel like we've actually given
Yes.
a lot of them throughout this whole talk, really.
Yeah, well, I think let's just think about, I know that we addressed indirectly about cravings and stuff like that. And the
Yep.
cravings is going to come, the gut microbiome, based on our nutrition and again, stressors and things like that can alter the microbiome, right?
Yep. Yep.
And then so we might be favoring certain foods. So let's start with the food. And that's the same for metabolic health
Yep.
and glucose management and insulin resistance, and which comes with prevention or of chronic diseases, right?
Exactly.
So the first thing that we do is let's understand what we're eating. Let's understand first is like, let's be realistic. Let's track those foods. It's as simple as that. Nobody
Yep.
likes to do that, but folks, awareness is number key. It is
Hmm.
number one, right?
Hmm.
So after awareness, then you say, okay, well, I mean, if you get an app like a chronometer or something like that, you
Yeah.
understand the macros.
Yeah.
And it says, okay, during the day, where I'm putting those macros, is that I'm exercising or not? I mean, is that the carbs are so much higher than my protein and fats? I mean, oh, that's interesting. So I always invite people to say, don't be judgmental about this phase. Be curious.
Yeah,
Be curious. It's not about judgmental. Oh my God, I'm doing this wrong. I'm doing this wrong. None of that. Let's identify what is potentially getting to a direction that you're not at. The thing is, you have a symptom of weight, fatigue, hormonal imbalances, brain fog, cravings. Those are all signs of gut and metabolic health imbalances. So let's start
exactly.
tracking, right?
Exactly. Yep.
First, that's one thing. So what is one of the things that you like to guide people to do in
Yeah,
addition to that?
well, I think just because we've been talking a lot about just carb and protein in general and how the having a good ratio of those things really matters with metabolic health and insulin resistance. Um, the guidelines I use, honestly, Maria, is like zero point 0.6 to zero point 0.8 grams of protein per pound of body weight, right? And it's less than maybe what some people are told, but I think getting to the place where if you're active and you do want to lose weight, like zero point 0.8 grams is a good place to be. And even at that, a lot of people are severely undershooting. So one thing you could do just as a simple action step is take your current body weight, multiply it by zero point 0.8, and just get a sense of what the actual ideal total of protein you're trying to hit in a day is, and just have that awareness. Very simple action step. And then if you're tracking, like Maria's saying, in an app that actually will calculate your grams of protein, you can start to get a sense of just how far off of that mark you are, right? So
Mm-hmm.
just starting there is a good place without getting too deep into that whole like how do we increase, or what if I'm getting too much, or that type of thing, right?
Right. And I will say this, there's a lot of talk about protein, a lot of talk about protein, right? I mean,
Mhm.
we went through, to all these discussions about the fat and about the protein. The protein comes back and forth. And now there's like, oh, everybody's consuming too much protein. Well, uh, there is no lack of protein in the diet. Let me tell you, about 95% of the people that I work with, they're
Are
not
under
consuming as
consuming.
much.
Yeah.
But then to your point, there is a basic kind of, calculation that you're saying.
Yeah.
I use different metrics as well based on what? The activity of the person. What kind of data do we have? Do we have a DEXA scan to see body composition, in body that measures body composition? Then we can see lean mass, where we can see the body fat. I use those kind of things also to then calculate protein and carbs, and it's mostly protein and carbs, right? It's
Yeah.
calories. Okay.
Mhm.
Yes, we're not a calorie inducer kind of person, but yes, if you want to lose weight, there's going to be some level of deficit, you know.
Sure.
Um, but then it's like, okay, what is the bare minimum to
Right.
maintain lean mass that you have today and not lose it?
That's exactly. Exactly, Maria.
So
Yeah.
when we have the data, which I prefer that, great. If not, then we go through general, right? Like you're talking
Exactly.
about.
That's a really good point. And even a smart scale might get a little better approximation if it's a pretty accurate smart scale, right? Because it'll give you lean mass. But yeah, and I think the only crowd of people that really could be over consuming would be like the carnivore style people that could be having a
Yes.
ton. And just to put this out there, like your body can take excess protein and convert that into ammonia and glucose. So it can potentially
Yes.
be a problem if it's excessive. But
Yes.
most of the people,
Yes.
like you said, Maria, are going to be undershooting, not overshooting it. So,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes. And one last thing. I recently working with a lady on her 20s, and she reminded me of me in so many ways. I was very excited to kind of work with her because she's like eating 6 7 times a day, cravings. She had a history of eating disorder, which is I had a history of that too. And I'm like, wow, I can see it. And I was like, oh my God, we're gonna do good over here. So, so we start adjusting and hormone issues and things like that, like feeling very fatigued and all that. And beautiful lady, beautiful young woman. And Anna says, okay, we're gonna go through this transition, and looking at her diet, I was like, whoa, I mean, this is, not only so much carbs compared to protein. She didn't believe me that adjusting her diet, that she could eat 3 times a day and actually not be munching
hungry.
on stuff. And she could. She didn't believe me. She told me that later, that she could stop eating because she was eating very close to bed, which we kind of That's another clue that we gave, on the earlier segment is, eating before bed, folks.
Terrible.
It's just is a recipe for weight gain.
Exactly.
Is a recipe for weight gain. So, it's 2, 3 hours. I prefer 3 hours, you know. And if we think like I'm hungry, okay, then let's evaluate here because that's coming from the morning. So
Exactly.
anyway, it's coming from the morning, right?
Yeah.
How we start the day. So fast forward, this girl you know, took the plunge. She says, okay, I'm going to do this. And then I meet with her and says, Maria, I didn't believe you, but I'm eating 3 meals a day and I'm stopping to eat. And she lost a ton of weight. She's
Yeah.
like, I saw, she showed me the pictures before and after. And then we did a food sensitivity on her. She started
Mhm.
2 weeks and a half of eliminating the food sensitivities and kind of getting into protein and fiber, right? And
Mhm.
complex carbs around working out. I mean, insane change.
Yeah. Is that funny?
Insane. And there is no GLP-1 drugs here, folks.
Right. Right. Yeah, your body knows how to do it. We just have to identify what the biggest blocks are and give it the right stuff to support it to work well. That's essentially as simple as it is. Simple, but not simple.
Yes. We
Yeah,
just have to be patient to the process, right?
that too.
Trust in certain ways, do our own research, work with people who have been helping others to achieve those sames that are data driven instead of the just, oh, let's try this, let's try that. That's why I end up changing to a data driven process in my business because most people have tried 1,000 things. They don't want to go back and try that. Let's try based on the data. So then we don't try, we do it.
Exactly,
You have
Maria.
a bigger reason to do it this way because you said, okay, my body's saying this. So well, heck, I mean, what do I want to do now?
Exactly.
Right?
Yep.
It's very empowering. This kind of stuff is so freaking empowering. It's just, to me, it's like sometimes people, I don't want to know. And it says, you don't want to be empowered to make decisions better for you? I, I, I just don't understand that concept. There is fears, I think, behind that of not wanting to know because of fear that maybe the lifestyle is going to change drastically, that I might lose some friends or this is going to disrupt my household. It's your body, it's your health, it's your energy, it's your aging process.
Right.
No, learn, right?
Exactly. Well, and that's why most people need coaching to help support that behavior change because more than half the battle is mental, I think with a lot of this stuff, honestly. You know. Which
Yeah.
is why we're here, Maria, because this is part of the methodology and the techniques we use to help people walk that path and make those changes sustainable and really take a hard look at their why and their
Yeah.
values, right? And their priorities. Those all have to be very clear. And that's hard to do on your own when you're in your own head, stuck in your own cycles of thoughts that you can't see beyond, right?
Or even don't have the accountability,
Oh,
or a
yeah.
person who is because we coaches might not be your best friend, right?
Right.
But we are your best friend here on this journey
Hmm.
to kind of look at you as a whole, as a person who wants to shine, and we want you to live a healthy life and vibrant so you can do the things that you love. So let's uncover that. What is that you love? What is that you want to do until the day you drop dead? Because it's going to happen. So hey,
Hmm.
I want to do my best. I want to have energy until the last second and be like, okay, it's time to go. Okay, time to go. But until that point, I want to be empowered, right? And we work with people from that angle. The reality is still have to do the work. We're here to empower, to give the data, to guide, to help you make tweaks, right? If this is going too fast, we slow down, but knowing that there's going to be patience, there is going to be this process, this marathon kind of thing.
Hmm.
Uh, but there is a finish line. Want to help you get there. So whatever it is, that process, we have to be kind to ourselves to understand that that process might change,
Exactly.
might change. I'm like, I want to do it all. The type A's. Give me no, give me no. I'm like, wow, that's a lot. I said, okay, step away.
That's why you need someone else to help you kind of reframe things, right? I mean, even the best of us, we're not going to be able to be that coach for ourselves all the time, Maria. It's just impossible.
Amen to that.
Yeah. Anyhow,
Amen to that.
this is a great place to wrap. We gave a lot of awesome information from testing to lab work to God, a lot. So, and the exercise piece was great too. So, if you have enjoyed this live, we will now be featuring ourselves on Facebook every month. So, stay tuned. Typically, it's around what are we doing? Almost the last Thursday of the month, although it will change from time to time, just depending on the schedule. So,
Yes,
yeah.
but we always let you know. So
Yeah.
awesome. Again, Courtney, it's always so much fun. Um,
Absolutely.
and I look forward for us to keep sharing and inspiring people, empowering people.
Yeah.
And obviously, Courtney and I are available if you want to ever talk about, what's going on with you. If you have questions, we're here to answer. You can both check us out. We're both online, have websites, whatever. bfabbu.com, that's mine. And you can always send messages, right?
Yep, and post questions below if you want us to dig
Yeah.
into specific things. We're happy to do that. So
Yes.
awesome. Good to see you, Maria. We'll connect soon.
Yes. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.